officially welcome you to today's Library Lab for Psychology 9000. If I haven't talked to you before, it's really nice to meet you all. I'm so glad that you could join me today. My name is Megan Testerman, and I'm the Psychology and Counseling Librarian here at Walden. And tonight, what I want to do for you is try to give you a pretty clear roadmap for how to find literature for your literature review. So I'm going to assume that you all are kind of in a position where you've identified your research problem and you've gone through the premise and the prospectus and you're really starting to dig into that literature and you're thinking about things like, where should I go to look for literature? How can I structure my searches so that I can get really good really good articles? How do I know when I've looked everywhere? So that's what we're going to cover today. And hopefully by the time you leave tonight, you will feel really confident about how to move forward wherever you happen to be at in this process. So this is what we're going to cover today, and I know it looks like a lot, but it'll go by really fast, I promise. The first thing we're going to look at is the scope and purpose of the literature review. And then we're going to actually, after that brief discussion, we're going to move into the library, and I'm going to give you a really practical demonstration on how to identify relevant databases. We're going to look at using keywords in your searches, how to use keywords, subject terms, Boolean operators, and limiters to refine your search. We're going to talk about options for full text, how to get the full text of something that's not available in the Walden Library. We're going to look at Google Scholar and discuss how and when to use Google Scholar. And then I'm going to show you some advanced techniques for looking for literature. So I'm going to show you citation chaining and bibliography mining. And then we're going to look at how to create an alert so that you can go off and do your data collection, your data analysis, and still get alerts on anything new that might be published related to your topic. And then I'm going to show you a couple search tools that are available to you. I'm sorry, not search tools, but some tools for your literature to help keep you organized. So we have a couple of different things that I can show you that will help you keep track of how you're finding your literature and keep track of what you are finding. And then today we're going to wrap up by going through a checklist that's going to help you determine if you have exhausted the literature. So we're going to address that million-dollar question of how do you know when you're done? And then I'll show you a couple places in the library to go to get more help with library research. And then we'll look at the questions and see if anyone has some questions or even some of their own research that maybe we could talk about as a group. So let's start by talking about the scope and purpose of the literature review. Now, I know a lot of students kind of approach the literature review by thinking of it as simply, a survey of the current literature on your topic. And that's true, that is what it is. But the literature that you choose to include in that literature review, it needs to actually do two things. It needs to deliver evidence of a phenomenon that's in your field and evidence that there's a gap addressing that particular phenomenon. And then that's going to create the justification for why your study needs to be done. So let's look at these two ideas just a little bit closer before we move on. So evidence. Now, evidence is when we're looking through all the literature that's on our topic, it's highly unlikely that we are going to find research that directly speaks to our very narrow doctoral level research problem. And that's a good thing, because if there was research on there, then it wouldn't be a gap in the literature and you would have to probably choose another research path. So what we're looking for in this case is that we're looking for evidence that there is a phenomenon that's significant to the field. And this is a very broad idea. So for example, these are actual subjects that I've seen students researching. So teacher burnout, coping mechanisms of patients with chronic illness, successful leadership traits. Now we know that all of these things are significant to the field because there's already so much research on those phenomenons. So what we're looking for is, well, where does the research run out of track? Where are the opportunities to build on the existing research that exists on these really broad topics. Well, that's our next challenge, is to kind of look for what the literature covers and what it doesn't cover, and then to take those and explore those opportunities to try to narrow down a gap and create our research question. So the phenomenon exists. We've decided that it's significant to the field because there's a significant amount of research that exists on it, but we might start to notice that there is a specific aspect of that phenomenon that has not been studied. So maybe a specific population or a group or geographical location, or maybe a particular theory hasn't been applied to this idea. So this is where we start really narrowing down and pinning that gap. So for example, the student who's researching teacher burnout might notice that there's significant research on teacher burnout and maybe even teacher burnout among first-year teachers, but that there's not a lot of research on teacher burnout among first-year teachers in special education in North Carolina. That's the gap. So here's another example: coping mechanisms of type 1 diabetics who have been diabetic for over 20 years, or successful leadership traits of individuals leading startup companies who manage employees remotely. So if you can kind of think about these research topics and how these students might go about finding literature, you might kind of think, all right, let's take this example of teacher burnout. That student's going to need to do research on teacher burnout. They're going to need to do research on teacher burnout and first-year teachers. They're going to need to do research on first-year teachers and special education, and then see if they can find any kind of research that's been done on perhaps teachers in North Carolina, first-year teachers in North Carolina, special education in North Carolina, special education teachers in North Carolina, to get that kind of background research that's going to give them that evidence and justification for why their study needs to be done. So when we're talking about all this different research that needs to go into your literature review, you're not going to actually include everything that you see. You're only going to include those pieces of literature that are going to build a case for you. So the ones that have evidence and the ones that provide that justification as to why your study needs to be done. So it needs to be an actual demand for research. It needs to be an authentic puzzle that needs to be solved. Now, if you get to this point and you're thinking, okay, or if you're already, at this point and you have your your premise done and perhaps you're working on your prospectus, there is a really handy tool that is provided by the Center for Research Quality called the litmus test. And if you haven't looked at this yet, it might be worth it, even if you're a little bit further in the process. The litmus test is a really nice just checklist that will help walk you through your research idea to make sure that it is actually a doctoral level research problem. And if you look at the things that are on this checklist, you'll see that it's exactly what we just talked about. Is it grounded in the literature? So could we, did our research problem come from this history of previous research? That's what it means to be grounded in the literature. Is there evidence that it's significant? Is this justified? So if you have kind of followed this method that I've been talking about of looking for literature that provides that evidence and justification, then you should be able to go down this checklist and answer all the questions. So let's take this over to the library homepage, and I'm going to show you kind of, all right, well, we know what we're looking for now. We're trying to get that good literature that's going to provide us a good case for why our study needs to be done. How do we actually do it? How do we actually go into the databases and find this information? So, all right. Just checking the questions really quick. So here we are on the library homepage, and we did just update it recently. So if it looks a little bit different to you, that's probably why. And there are two ways that we can kind of start our research. We can use our big, large search box on the front of the library homepage, or we can actually go into the psychology research home. So I'm going to show you both methods. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to use Thoreau to get your research started. So let's say that we are interested in the topic of drug abuse among high school students. Well, let's just take our largest kind of concept here and plug it into that top search box. And we're going to make sure that Thoreau is checked. Now, when I hit this search button, what it's going to do is search Thoreau, which looks a lot like a database. But Thoreau is actually not a database. It is a multi-database search tool. So you can kind of think about it as Walden's Google. Let's get signed in here. So it searches a good number of our databases, but not all of them. It's really useful for doing coursework, or if you need to get an article really quick for a discussion post. But when we're doing doctoral level research, Thoreau's not going to be sufficient for all of our searching, but it can help us get started. So let me show you how to use Thoreau in that sense. So let's say that our topic is drug use and let's say high school students. High school students. Okay, now before I click search, I'm going to make sure that I uncheck that full text box. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see students accidentally make, because a lot of times that full text box is automatically checked anytime you go into a database. But when you're doing doctoral level research, you're going to want to uncheck that full text box so that you can see everything that's been published on this topic, whether we have it or Walden or not. Unfortunately, no library has everything, and that includes Walden. So by unchecking this full text box, we're going to cast our net just a little bit wider. It's going to include a much larger selection of material. And then I'm going to check the peer-reviewed scholarly journals box. And the reason that I'm doing that is because according to your rubric, you're going to need to choose literature for your literature review that comes from peer-reviewed scholarly journals. And if I check this box, it's going to give me a really realistic idea of what the pool of literature is that I have to choose from. Now, likewise, at this point, I like to bring the publication date up a little bit because, I mean, articles from 1838 aren't probably going to do me much good. So I'm going to bring it up to, let's just say 2010. Just to kind of, give me a little bit of history. It's outside that 5-year period that we need to stick to for the literature review, but it'll help me kind of understand where that research has come from. So uncheck full text, check peer review, bring the publication date up a little bit, and then just start typing in a few of your keywords. Now, when you're doing this, I want you to stay really, really broad when we're doing this exploratory early research. So I've just done a search in Walden. It's searching a large number of our databases. I have unchecked full text, checked peer reviewed, brought up the publication date, and I have over 5,000 results. Now that's really great. However, we are not going to be able to do all of our research in Thoreau, sadly. And I know you're probably thinking, but it's all probably right here. Well, unfortunately, it's not. So again, Thoreau only searches about 85% of our databases, so you're going to be missing a lot that's out there. But besides that, in your chapter 2, you're going to have to describe your search criteria or your search strategy. So you need to know the databases that you searched, the keywords that you searched, what kind of journals came up, what your results look like. And you're going to have to kind of write all of this down and represent it in your chapter 2. Now, the reason that we do this is that the idea is to kind of leave a trail of breadcrumbs for any future researcher who might want to pick up your research where you left off. So we need to leave them kind of a clear map. But if we say Thoreau, it's probably not going to do them much good because Thoreau is only available to Walden faculty, students, and staff. So at some point, we're going to have to leave Thoreau and go into the subject-specific databases. But we still have this really big question, which is, well, what databases do I go to? especially if we're looking at a topic like drug use among high school students. If it's drug use, then maybe we should be looking in the psychology databases or the health sciences databases. If we're looking at high school students, then maybe we should look at some of our education databases. And those are kind of scattered throughout the library. So how do you know which ones to go to? Well, that's where Thoreau is really useful, because Thoreau is going to give us a roadmap for the databases that we should go look at next. So I'm actually going to not show you what's here in this results column, but over here under refine results is where this map is, and it's down here under databases. So this is going to give us a pretty complete list of all of the EBSCOhost hosted databases. So EBSCOhost is a vendor. These are the databases that all of these 5,000 plus articles came from. So what we could do is really, take a paper and pencil and just write down the first 10 or 15 of these databases, and that's where we're going to go next. And we're going to go into each one of these databases and repeat our search until we have really, exhausted the literature. So let's actually try that process. Let's go into PsycInfo. PsycInfo, I'm sure you're well acquainted with by now. It is one of our largest psychology databases, and it has a great selection of both peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed articles. And the way that we're going to get to it today is we're going to go into the Psychology Research Home. So if you haven't been to the Psychology Research Home yet, welcome. This is kind of your home in the library, where we have collected all of the resources that are related to the subject of psychology. So everything having to do with psychology research is here in one place for you. So for example, we have psychology databases, a pretty extensive list. We also have journals that you can browse through by topic. We have our tests and measures databases. And we have a couple really fantastic databases that are video collections. So if you want to see psychology experiments, or if you want to look at, therapy in action, we've got videos on that. And we also have a book section, which is where we keep our encyclopedias, but also the DSM-5. So if you need that for anything, you can come and look for it right here. Now, below this section on resources, we have research help. So we have kind of psychology research basics. We're going to go through all this, so you should be well acquainted with that by the time we leave here. But then we also have some guides for literature review, how to find tests and measures and reliability and validity, and how to track down an author and all that great stuff. We have information on how to find theories and theorists. We have information on how to find reliable statistics. And then we also have our calendar of upcoming webinars and your residency materials. So a lot of great stuff on this page. I hope you will bookmark it and come and check it out. I'm going to actually put the link for you all in the chat box so that you have it. So what we're looking for, back to the task at hand, is PsycInfo. So PsycInfo is under our list of psychology databases right here. And again, it's one of the largest psychology or social science databases that we have. But also PsycInfo has some really cool tools that are not available in other databases that I want to make sure that you're aware of. So we're going to spend a little time in PsycInfo today. So I'm going to just repeat that search that I was doing before. I'm going to do drug use and high school students. And I'm going to uncheck the full text, check the peer-reviewed scholarly journals box, and I'm going to just go ahead and set some limiters. I'm actually going to take it back a little bit further. I'm going to go back to 2000. And that's really the publication date is such a personal preference. It's completely up to you. I would give it a little bit wider berth than just 5 years, just so that you can kind of see again that history of where your research came from. So uncheck full text, check peer reviews, set the publication date, and now I'm going to click search and have a first look at what my results look like. Okay, so we have 743 results. Now, what exactly is the database doing here? How did the database determine what 743 articles it was going to bring you? Well, the database, what it's trying to do right now is find us articles that have these exact 5 words present somewhere in that article. Now, that doesn't mean that the article is necessarily about drug use and high school students. Really those 5 words could just be somewhere mentioned in that article, and that was the only criteria that the database needed to retrieve it. So we have a lot of articles here that mention drug use and high school students, but let's talk about ways that we can actually tell the database, I want you to only bring back articles that have been classified as being about drug use and high school students. So the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to translate our keyword search into a subject term search. Now, what are subject terms? Well, subject terms are the way that we classify what articles are about. So you'll see some example subject terms right here. It's also the language that the database uses to talk about these topics. So the database kind of has a preferred language to use. So for example, I just typed in drug use because that was what came into my head, but I could have just as easily typed in substance use, substance abuse, drug abuse. There's any number of ways that we could talk about this particular topic. So let's ask the database, what is the preferred subject term for the keyword drug use? And to do that, I'm going to look it up in the thesaurus. So every database has either an index or a thesaurus where you can look up the subject term for a keyword. So let's have a look at the thesaurus and type in drug use. And before I click browse, I'm going to click this relevancy ranked button. And what that will do is it's going to give me a nice cluster of subject terms that are related to the words drug use. So I can kind of just, browse through here and pick a term that I think is the best fit. And what I see at the bottom of the list here is drug usage. So I'm going to go back to my search and I'm going to use the subject term drug usage instead of drug use. And there's a very important second step to this process. So we've gotten the correct language that the database uses, but now we need to be really specific and tell the database, I want you to only bring back articles that have been classified as being about drug usage. So I'll select the SU from the drop-down box to the right of the search field. And then for high school students, I looked this up earlier, and high school students actually is the correct subject. So subject heading. So let's again uncheck our full text, check the peer-reviewed scholarly journals box. I'm going to bring up the publication date to 2000 to 2018 and click search. So we had about 700, was it before? 700 results, and now we have 289. So that might seem like a whole lot less, but remember that 289, these are all articles that have been classified as being about drug usage and high school students. So we've just excluded, a good 500 articles that are not on topic and might have wasted a lot of our time. So these are going to be much more relevant articles for you to start kind of wading through and figuring out if there are any that might be useful for your literature review. So that's one way that we can start to refine our results, is that we can translate the keywords that we've used into subject terms using the thesaurus or the index that is provided in the database. Now, there's another way that we can refine our results, which is to change the relationship between these two subject terms or these two keywords. So let's go back to our original keyword search, the one that was getting us a whole lot of articles, just to have a nice broad search to start with. So we have 743 articles here. So what we see is that there's a drop-down box between these first two search fields, and it says and, or, and not. Now, these are kind of our options for changing the relationship between drug use and high school students. So when we have and selected, the database is going to look for all 5 of those words in that article. But what do or and what do not do? Well, or is an expander. It's going to bring us back more results by expanding our search terms. So remember how we were debating, which ones we should use? Should we use drug use or drug abuse or substance abuse? You can actually string all of those keywords together by separating them with the Boolean operator or. A Boolean operator is just a fancy phrase that means these three words, and, or, and not. So we're going to string them all together like this. As long as they're all related to one concept, they can go into that one search field. And let's see what this does to our results. Now, do you think the number is going to go up or it's going to go down? Okay, so we had 700, now we have over 1,500. So that turned out to be a really powerful expander. It brought us back a lot more results because any of these words will qualify as the criteria to bring back an article. Now, what about not? Well, not is an excluder. It does the opposite. And if we use not, it will filter out articles that are not useful to us. So let's say that we're interested in researching drug use among high school students, but we don't want to study marijuana use. Let's just say, for example. But the problem is that anytime we do a search, we're just flooded with articles that are about marijuana use among high school students. So we can actually exclude those articles by typing in marijuana and using the Boolean operator not. So now let's see what happens to our results. So we have 1,500. Okay, so that took it down by about 400. So there must have been 400 articles that had the word marijuana in them. So where I've seen this be really useful for psychology students is that, a lot of times when you're exploring the field of psychology, or especially talking about psychologists as a profession, a lot of times you'll get articles that are about counselors or teachers or nurses. And if you're getting bogged down with that, go ahead and just set a knot and just exclude those articles to get them out of your way so that you can just focus on, what the most relevant articles are for you. Okay, so before we move on, let me show you just a visual representation of what the Boolean operators look like. Okay, so here's and. If we can imagine that in this left circle, these are all the articles that are about politics, and these are all the articles that are about media, the database is going to bring back only those articles that have both of those terms. Now here's or, and this is such a great example, and one that you might even use in your research if you're a forensic psychology student. Law enforcement, police, is going to bring back and, or, and either of those terms. Here's not another really clever example: Civil War, not American. So here's everything that talks about the Civil War, here's everything that has Civil War and America, and here's everything that talks about America. So you can see how it excludes. So hopefully that kind of um, helps illustrate how these relationships between these terms can change. So we've talked about two ways that we can use keywords and manipulate our keywords to get better results. A second way of refining our results that I want to show you is how to use this big menu that's over here in the left-hand column under Refine Results. So if we scroll down here, we'll see a couple limiters. These are all called limiters that will help us refine what these results are. So one of the first things that we see is this subject box. If we open that box up, these are all subject terms that the database is telling us is related to the search that we're doing. So if you're kind of struggling to find keywords, or if you're struggling to find subject terms, this would be a great way to go and look. Basically, this is the database brainstorming for you related terms. So you might go through here and see, oh, drug abuse is a really good one, or maybe drug usage, or maybe middle school students, or maybe I want to narrow it down to alcohol drinking problems. I would recommend that, check this box frequently, and if there are any terms that are related to your topic, go ahead and jot them down and then try them out. The database, we expect a lot out of it, but it really just is software. And we kind of have to be willing to play with it and do some trial and error and experiment to get the searches right to bring us back what we're looking for. So don't be afraid to play with it. Um, Over here again in this left-hand column under Refine Results, we see some other really fun things, such as we can look for the publication, so we can see what kind of journals are giving us the most results. We can have a look at the publisher. We can limit to English if we're getting too many foreign language articles. If we're looking for a particular population, there are some age limiters that are built in here, and sometimes these can be a whole lot easier to use than using terms like baby boomer or Generation X or millennial. If you're kind of working with any of those age groups, you might want to try swapping out those terms for just an age limiter and see if that doesn't get you a little bit closer to your population. And then the two boxes that I want to show you that are just so cool in PsycInfo are these two: methodology and tests and measures. Now, these two boxes are unique to PsycInfo, so you won't find them in other databases, but they are just so neat, and I feel like they are just PsycInfo's like hidden treasures. So let's say that you are wanting to do a quantitative study on drug use in high school students. You can actually ask PsycInfo to limit those results to only the 880 that are quantitative studies. That can be such a easy, fast way to get an idea of how other researchers are structuring their quantitative research on your topic. Likewise, we have this test and measures button. Now, the test and measures, if you plan on doing data collection, you're likely going to be looking for some kind of an instrument that's going to help you with that data collection process. So you might be looking for a questionnaire, a survey, an assessment, and you're always encouraged to select an instrument that is going to be the best fit for the research that you want to do. And you're also encouraged to select a test or measure that is the most well respected, most used, the most reliable, the most valid test that you can possibly get. And sometimes it can be really hard to figure out, where do you even start looking for these? You can look for them right here. It's so great. So let's say you type in your topic and keep it really, really broad, and then come down over here and look at tests and measures. And this is going to give you the names of some of the scales that are used for this topic. It'll give you a great starting place. Now you have a name. Now you can go look up that test and see if maybe it might be a good fit for your research. So again, these are those two in particular, methodology and tests and measures, are unique to PsycInfo. So you won't see those in other databases. And also you do, for those two tabs to show up, you really do need to have a pretty large search result. So if you're trying this at home as we're going through and you're saying you only got 10 results and there's no methodology tab, that's probably why. You have to have enough results to kind of populate those two tabs. So we've talked about a lot of different ways to refine our results to help us get those articles that are going to be the most useful for us. So now we would be at a point where we would want to start kind of going through the articles that are showing up, reading the abstracts, seeing if they might be useful for our literature review. And we're going to want to start reading the full text of a lot of these articles, especially if they seem like they might be useful. So how do we get the full text of an article? So anytime you're doing a database search like this, you're probably going to run into one of three situations. So the first one is that you'll see a PDF link right here. And that means that the database that you're in, which right now is PsycInfo, has that full text available. So I can click on that link and the PDF should pop right up. The other thing that I might see is something like this, a Find at Walden button. Now, when we click this Find at Walden button, what it's going to do is it's telling us that PsycInfo doesn't have this article, but that somewhere else in our library, in some other database, we do have it. And this Find at Walden button is going to act like a bridge that's going to take us from the database that we're in, which is PsycInfo, to a database that has that full text. So in this case, we're going to, where are we going? Science Direct? We're going to Science Direct. And then here we see that the full text is available and also the HTML. So if you see that Find at Walden button, don't be afraid to use it. Now, sometimes, however, when you click that Find at Walden button link, you'll turn up empty-handed. It might say, go to this database, and then you'll get here and it'll say sorry, there's no full text available. What is going on when that happens? Well, a lot of times you will encounter that when you have an article that is from the past 6 to 12 months. So there's something called a digital embargo. Now, this is a tool that publishers use where they withhold the digital copy of the article for 6 months to up to a year, to encourage libraries to purchase the print copy of that journal. Now, Walden Library, we don't have stacks, so we have nowhere to house a print copy of the journal. So when there's a digital embargo on an article, sometimes we won't be able to have that full text for 6 months up to a year. So what do you do if we don't have it? Or what do you do if you come across the third option, which is this? There's no full text link here at all. How can you find the full text of something that we do not have in the library? Well, first step that you might want to take is to go over to Google Scholar and see if maybe Google Scholar has that article for free available on the web. So let's say we're going to do a search for an article on elder abuse. Now, when I see this article here, there's a link on the title, and this seems like the most just obvious logical place to click. Now, if we do click on that title, what it's going to do is take us to the publisher's page for this article, and a lot of times it's going to ask us to pay. Now, please don't pay for anything just yet. Paying for an article on your own should be an absolute last resort. I feel that we have enough options that are available to you that you really shouldn't have to use this. And especially here in this case. So if I clicked on this article, the publisher might want me to pay, but you know what? We have it at Walden, so that would be a real shame. So what I'm going to do is show you how to first link Google Scholar to the Walden Library so that anytime I search for an article, if we have it at Walden, it should pop up right here. So really quickly, how to do this. You click on the hamburger up here, go to Settings, go to Library Links, and type in Walden. And then when you click Search, this is what's going to pop up. Walden University Library with an empty checkbox. Check it, click Save, and now anytime we search for an article that we have in the library, you'll see a nice Find at Walden link over here. Now you'll also notice that there are some other full text options here in the right-hand column. For example, looks like the NIH has a copy of this, the CDC has a copy of this article. Here's another one from another third party. These are all links to where you can get a copy of that full text for free. Sometimes they're a little tricky and sometimes it does take you to the publisher's page, but it's good to kind of do your due diligence and just check and see if there are any other full text options out there. So if there is, that's fantastic. Go ahead and click on that, have a look at the article. If you are looking for something and there is no full text link, then what? Okay, at this point, come over to the library and go to our services button that's at the top of the page. And I'm going to send you over here to the document delivery service. Now, document delivery service is a service that we provide for Walden students to help you get the full text of something that is not available in the library. It looks kind of complicated. It's really not. You just click Sign into DDS. You'll fill out a form with your contact information and also the information about the citation that you're looking for, and you click Submit. And that request goes to our collections librarian. And she's going to, first of all, she's going to make sure that we don't have it hiding somewhere in the library. And then if we don't have it, she's going to see if, maybe it's available on the web. She'll double check that. And then she's going to see if maybe one of our partner institutions have it. And this works really well, especially for those articles that are under digital embargo, because a lot of our partner institutions do have the print of the journal and they can just photocopy it and send it to us. Now, if we can't get it in our partner institutions, sometimes we will pay for that article on behalf of the student if it is under a certain amount. So, like I said, please don't pay for anything yet. Come to, go to Google Scholar, use the document delivery service. It takes about 7 to 10 days to do document delivery service. You'll either get an email at the end of that time that says, here's the PDF, or I'm sorry we weren't able to get that for you. And if that's what happens, if you really do turn up empty-handed after all of this, why don't you just send us a note at Ask a Librarian and we'll help give you some options for where to go from here. Usually what we would recommend is for you to go to your local libraries. Perhaps there's a college or a university near you that has a copy of that print journal, and maybe they would at least allow you to read the article, maybe even photocopy it, depending on their local policies. So those are some options for getting the full text of articles that we do not have in the Walden Library. So while we are at Google Scholar, let's talk about things that Google Scholar can do well and things that it's not so great at. Google Scholar, it's Google, so of course anytime you type anything into Google, you get so many results. Now that can be really great, but it can also be a really big time suck because now you have to wade through 347,000 articles to see if there's anything useful to you. And you'll also notice that Google doesn't have this really great menu that the databases have to help you really refine your results and get only those articles that are going to be the most useful to you. So it's always kind of a shot in the dark, but it is still a great tool, and you should at some point use Google Scholar just to make sure that there isn't any literature out there that you might have overlooked. Now, something that Google Scholar does not do that you definitely need to know about is Google Scholar does not limit to peer review. So any article that I might find here in Google Scholar, I'm going to have to independently verify on my own that that article came from a peer-reviewed scholarly journal. So keep that in mind when you're looking through Google Scholar. Just because it's here doesn't mean that you're going to be able to include it in your literature review because it might not fit that criteria of being peer-reviewed. But one thing that Google Scholar does really well is citation chaining. Now, citation chaining is an advanced technique that we use to see and keep track of who has cited an article since its original publication. So, for example, if we're looking at this article, The Relationship Between Dementia and Elder Abuse, we'll see a link right below it that says cited by 379. And when we click on that link, it's going to give us a pretty complete list of all of the articles and books that have cited this article since its original publication back in 1993. And we see there's quite a lot. There are 379 results. So perhaps this article, documented some kind of really interesting research, and you want to see if anyone ever followed up on that research. This would be a really great way to do that. At this point, you might want to introduce a custom date range, again, just to bring that publication date up a little bit, see if anyone has done any research recently that cited this original article. So now we're down to 144 results, and we might be able to just skim through here and see if there's anything that might be useful. So citation chaining is one of those things that I kind of think of as like fishing. It's like we're using this one article as bait to lead us to other articles that are on that topic and are thus relevant to our research. Now, citation chaining brings us forwards in time, into the future from that article, but we can actually go backwards in time as well, and that's using something called bibliography mining. So that's looking at the bibliography of whatever the material is, if it's an article or a book, and seeing who they cited. And you can do this with dissertations too. You can go and look up dissertations that are related to your topic and have a look at who they cited. Sometimes that'll dig up some research that you might have missed. So again, it's kind of like fishing. We're going to use these really good articles as bait to bring us to other really good stuff. Okay, let's just check in where we are here on our list. Great. Let's talk about before we leave Google Scholar, let's talk about how to create an alert. Now, as you are putting your literature review behind you and moving on to data collection and data analysis, you are actually expected to stay on top of your current literature through the publication of your dissertation. So, there's two ways you can kind of go about doing that. You can come back to the library a lot and repeat all of your searches and see if anything new pops up, or you can create an alert and ask either Google or ask the databases to notify you anytime something new is published that meets your search criteria. So in this case, we're here in the citation chaining part of this article. So our search criteria is, please notify me anytime something new is published that cites this article. And then I would just go to create an alert, tell Google my Gmail, which it probably already knows, and then click create an alert. And then anytime something new is published, this is what it's going to send you. Just kind of a nice little link and a link to the publisher and a little blurb on that article. So we can do the same thing in databases with searches. So in Google Scholar, we did it with citation chaining, but in the database, we can actually work up a really nice search string. We can have our keywords perfect. We can have all of these limiters, how we want them over here in the left-hand column. And when we get a really good search result, we can go over here to the share button and click create an email alert. Again, it's going to ask you for your email. I think it also wants you to make a login for EBSCOhost, but just give it your information, and then anytime something new is published that meets this exact search criteria, they'll send you a nice little notification so you can stay up on any kind of new research is published while you're off doing your fantastic research. So we've talked a lot about how to use library resources and resources outside the library, such as Google Scholar, to collect all of this literature that we are thinking about, including in our literature review. So at this point, we're probably amassing, a huge amount of literature and articles, and we're going to have some kind of a system in place for staying organized and keeping on top of all of the research that we're collecting. So let me show you a couple tools that are available to you to help you stay organized. The first one that I want to show you is a search log. Now remember how I was talking about in your chapter 2, how you have to describe your search criteria. So that is you keeping track of how you found the literature that's in your literature review. So to start keeping track of that, you can start something very simple like this, such as a search log. This is really at its simplest just an Excel spreadsheet. Just open up Excel, type in database, search term, results, and notes, and that is it A or is it 1? I think it's 1. This is A1. In that first line here, and then underneath it, just start filling in, what you're doing as you're going along and doing your searches. Now, I'm sure this group is probably well into research right now, but do this at your earliest opportunity because the literature review research process is going to take you probably much longer than you think. It's going to take you weeks, if not months. So you can imagine that as you're hopping around between all these different databases, you could very easily get lost. You could very easily repeat yourself and waste a lot of time. So this will help keep your process straight, and it's also going to give you all the information that you're going to need for that search criteria section of your chapter 2. So that's keeping track of how we're searching for the literature. How do we keep track of the literature that we're actually finding? Well, at this point, there's lots of different ways that you could do this. You could print out the articles that you find, and you could, highlight them and put them in manila folders all over your dining room table. You could save them to folders on your computer, or you could use something called citation management software. So let's have a look at what citation management software looks like. So citation management software it does what it sounds like it does, which is it does help you generate citations, but it can also help you keep track of all the articles that you're collecting. So let me show you really quickly an example of what this kind of software looks like. So the kind that I have installed on my computer is Zotero. And this is what it looks like. It's just a little standalone window that I can save articles to folders. And if you see a blue dot next to it, that means that the PDF is also saved and it's offline. So if I were sitting on an airplane, I could actually read these articles. And then I can make notes on them, I can add tags, and I do have citation information. And I can use this to help generate citations. See, I can create a bibliography from this everything that's in this folder. Now, the Writing Center would like me to tell you at this point in time that um, anytime you use software to generate citations, you are going to absolutely have to go and proofread them. And I know we like to think that the software, should be perfect and should make no mistakes whatsoever, but it does. And the Writing Center tells me that anytime a student uses citation generating software, they can always tell because there are always mistakes. And in the end, it's you who is responsible for having those clean, good citations. So please, please double check. But it can save you a little bit of typing. It'll help at least kind of put things in the right, more or less the right order, and then just go in there and make sure you clean it up. So how do the articles get into Zotero and get into these nice little tidy folders? Well, let's go over to the database and let's say that I found this article that I thought was really neat and I wanted to save it to my collection to kind of look at a little bit more in depth later. I can actually go to this is called the record of the article. Here's the full text of the record. I can go to my Zotero extension that is installed in Chrome. And when I click that button, it's going to save it to my literature review folder in Zotero. Here we go. And then when I go over to Zotero, here's my article and here's my full text. So everything's saved here, and then I can go back and look at it later. I can also, move things around. I can, add or subtract. I can organize this however I like. It can just be nice to be able to kind of digitally shuffle your articles around without having to, literally move manila folders all over your dining room table. But it's completely up to you. So when it comes to citation management software, there are so many different kinds, so many different brands. Some of them are free, some of them are paid for, some of them have student discounts. It's really up to you to kind of figure out a method that works for you, whether it's a software or not. So what I would recommend is having a look at, our guide on citation management software that will explain a little bit more about what it is and what it does. And then the library does not provide any kind of technical support for these, third-party softwares, and we don't endorse any particular brand. But because students use it so much, we did review Mendeley and Zotero for you, and we made a guide for each one that walks you through its basic features, just so that you have kind of a base for going off and exploring on your own and hopefully finding something that works really well for you. Okay, so we can use the search log, keep track of how we're finding literature. We can use citation management software or our own very clever system for keeping track of what we are collecting. Now let's talk about organizing the articles that you are going to choose to put in your literature review. So if you can imagine, what's in Zotero is going to be just a mountain. It's almost like if you're a sculptor and you have this giant pile of clay, you're not going to use all of it in your final sculpture. So this is our pile of clay, is our Zotero, all of the articles that we're looking at. And then we're going to select articles to include into our literature review. So to help us get a handle on that and start thinking about synthesizing all this information, you might want to try using the literature review matrix, which is a great tool that the Writing Center put together for you all. Let's do matrix. Literature review matrix. So I'm going to pop in and show you an example of what this looks like filled out rather than try to explain it to you. So this is what a literature review matrix looks like. And at first glance, you can kind of see what it's doing. So it's, again, an Excel spreadsheet where we've taken each article that we want to include in the literature review and broken it down into its major components. So here's our theoretical or conceptual framework. Here's the research question. Here's the methodology. Here are the results, conclusions, implications for further research, implications for practice. Everything is broken down. Now, I'm sure you're looking at this thinking, this looks like just about the most tedious thing I could do, but it's super, super useful because once you have everything broken down like this, it's really easy to go back and forth between all of your articles and look for points to compare and contrast. And that's what you want your literature review to do. You want to synthesize this information not by just repeating what everybody said in their article, but by looking for those points of similarity and looking for those points of contention. So let's say that you're doing this and you start to notice that most of your authors use the same conceptual framework. Well, that's a talking point. Or perhaps you find that they all have just about the same sample size. That's a talking point. Or perhaps you have one author who is just totally against, disagrees with everything that everyone else is doing. That's a talking point. And that's what we want to represent in our literature review. We want it to be a spirited conversation about the current state of research on your topic, and this is going to help get you there. So that is those are some tools that are available to you. Let's check back in and see where we are. Great, we are almost to the end of the presentation. We're going to cover that really big million-dollar question of how do you know when you're done, and then we'll look at where to get help in the library. So how do you know when you're done? What a great question, and it's a question that I get just about all the time. Let me find this link for you. I'm going to put it in the chat box so you can have a look at it. The question and the answer is probably not something that you want to hear, which is that how do I know when I'm done? How do I know how much to include in my literature review? How long does my literature review have to be? And the answer is, it really does depend on your topic. So there are some things that we can do to kind of help make sure that we're on the right track. So generally, what we say is that if you are looking in a variety of places for literature. So you're looking in the library databases, you're looking in Google Scholar, you're looking at other institutions, you're exploring all of your options. And if you are also searching for a wide variety of keywords, so you're using keywords, you're using subject terms, you're thinking of broader terms, you're thinking of narrower terms. If you're doing both of those things and you are trying every combination you can think of, and you are still only getting the same authors and the same articles that you already have collected, then you are probably on the right path to exhausting the literature. Now, if you're still feeling really unsure about it, we've created this checklist to help walk you through to make sure that you are covering all of your bases. So let's have a look at some of the things that are on the checklist. Have you searched databases in your subject area? Okay, so you'll see a lot of this is what we've been talking about today. So that would be databases that are in the psychology research home. Have you looked at databases outside of your subject area? So remember we were talking about drug use among high school students and how we need to look at education databases and how we need to look at health sciences databases. Have you used a variety of keywords and subject terms? So we talked about that. Have you unchecked the full text box? Major, major. Have you used document delivery service to get articles from other institutions? Have you had a look at dissertations or non-peer-reviewed sources to see if those are leads to some articles that you might have missed? Have you looked in Google Scholar? Have you created an alert? Have you done citation chaining? Have you consulted your colleagues in the field? When you guys are at residency, you might very well meet someone who is working on something similar to yours. You guys are colleagues now. You can check and talk with each other and share research and share information. You can consult with your faculty members. You can consult with your chair, see if there's anything else that might be out there. So this is a pretty good checklist for you to go through. And if there's anything on here that you feel a little unsure about, you can click on the link and that will take you to a guide that will give you some more information on that topic. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the library homepage and show you some options that you have for how to get some more help. But if you have any questions that you would like us to talk about in a group, think about them now and put them in the question box, and then I'll look at the question box and see if there's anything that we can talk about as a group. And if you would like to maybe discuss your research topic, you can put it in. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to kind of, stick around and workshop those with you if you'd like. So, Library University homepage, we have a couple options for Get Help. So, if you were eagle-eyed, you probably saw me doing this thing where I was typing in a search term here, clicking search everything, and getting some kind of a helpful guide on it. What I was doing was I was searching our quick answers. So, quick answers is our university-wide FAQ, and we have done a really great job of making a very robust quick answers to address just about everything having to do with library research that you're going to need to do doctoral level research. So remember how I was saying that Google Scholar cannot limit to peer review. And I said, if you find something in Google Scholar, you're going to have to independently verify that it was peer reviewed. And you might have been thinking at that point, how do I do that? Well, good question. Let's ask quick answers. So I would just type in some keywords like verify peer review. Make sure I hit that search everything button. And then you'll see here in the middle column that we have quick answers that address that topic. And that over in the right-hand column, we have some of our larger guides, that library guides that are on that topic. And if we look right here, we see there is the question that we're trying to ask. How do I verify that my article is peer reviewed? And you'll see there's a nice little blurb about it. Then we have a step-by-step process for how to do that thing. And then we even have a nice little super short 1-minute video that shows you exactly how to do it. No fluff, gets you straight to the thing that you need to know. So quick answers, really fantastic. The library has quick answers. Financial aid has quick answers, writing center has quick answers. This should be your go-to place to go get answers because you don't have to wait for someone to get back to you. So again, just make sure you select search everything and then type in whatever it is that you're curious about. Now, if you do that and you're still not getting an answer to your question, why don't you reach out to us at Ask a Librarian? We have a button up here in the top right-hand corner. And if you click on that, you'll see you have a couple options for contacting us. We have email. There's an email form you can fill out. We have chat hours that are available now. You can also call and leave us a voicemail, and we can get back to you via email in your Walden email. And as doctoral students, you also have the option to make a doctoral research appointment. Now, I know I've spoken to some of you already doing a research appointment, so at least some of you know how to use it, but you can click on this Schedule a Doctoral Research Appointment button, and then click that you have read the policy, and then go down here to School of Counseling and School of Psychology, and then that's going to get you to my calendar. And then from here, you can have a look and see if I have any availability for that month. Now, sometimes, like this month, it's been a really busy month and I've been booked up, but that's okay, don't panic. There is another link right above this to the calendars of our doctoral research librarians who are also just fantastic and get you a lot of help. So if I'm booked, you can do that. You can also wait until the end of the month when I post my availability for the next month. So if you need some advanced help, specific to your research, please make an appointment. We have a couple ways that I can talk to you. I can talk to you via phone call. We can do a Skype appointment where we can do some like screen sharing. And we can also do email. So if one of my times doesn't work for you, go ahead and just select a time anyway and select email, and then we'll get something started with the email until we can talk further. So one last place I want to show you for Get Help is the Get Help button up here at the top of the library homepage. There's a lot of great stuff on this page, such as guides, tutorials, residency information, technical help, but we also have a pretty large recorded webinar archive that I wanted to make sure that you guys knew was out there because we have webinars on just about everything. Under library skills, you'll find webinars on doing the lit review, citation management software, tests and measures, statistics, everything. But then we also have webinars that are on the topic of psychology research. So if you select that link, then you will be taken to these subject-specific webinars on the field of psychology. Okay, wow, that was a really fast hour, but we are here at the end of the presentation. If you need to go, you are more than welcome to. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that that gave you a really clear idea of kind of where you are in this whole process, and hopefully gives you some direction for moving forward. So I'm going to have a look at the questions if you'll give me just a moment and see if I can answer any of these. Okay, a lot of great questions. Okay. All right. So there's a question about the standards for so the literature that you include in your literature review. You need to follow the rubric for that literature, and the rubric states that the majority of the vast majority of the literature that you include is going to be from the past 5 years and is going to be from peer-reviewed scholarly journals. It's not a hard and fast rule. There is a little bit of wiggle room. So for example, if you have a government report that illustrates um, a statistic that has a statistic that is essential to your argument that this topic is significant to the field. Well, government documents are not peer reviewed, so can you include that? And the answer is you can if you have a really good argument for it. And that goes for the 5-year rule too. If you have something that's, 7 or even 10 or 15 years old, if you can argue that it is absolutely essential to understanding why your research needs to be done, if it presents evidence, if it presents evidence of a gap, then you can argue to have it included. So my recommendation would be make a good strong case for yourself and then take it to your chair as to why you need to include that. But yes, you do need to stay within that 5-year limit and that peer-reviewed limit. Now, if you're thinking about a topic, if you've got a topic in mind, and you go over to Thoreau and do that exploratory research and you don't see articles that are from the past 5 years, then be forewarned. You might need to adjust your research problem or your research topic to get you to a topic that does have current research, because that is an essential component of doing a dissertation at Walden, is that it has to be current. So yes, so definitely do stick to those. And if when in doubt, look at the rubric. That will help guide you. Okay. Okay. Talking about how to narrow a search. Um, so the way that I like to think of kind of, we were talking about having some of these, really broader topics and then narrowing them down to the gap that we're at. That process of doing that, you can do it in Thoreau, actually. You can use Thoreau as a tool to help you figure out if there is kind of a trail of research that leads you to a gap. So if we were to start again at Thoreau and type in drug use, we're going to get into Thoreau and set up our search really quickly here. Uncheck full text, check peer review, check. Bring the publication date up quite a bit. Okay, so now I have drug use, and we can see that this is a really broad topic because we have almost 250,000 articles. So we're going to have to start narrowing this down. So how do we narrow it down? Well, we can think about drug use among a certain population. Maybe we think of teenagers. Oops, not teen pregnancy, we want teenagers. Okay, so if we do drug use and teenagers, how does that narrow us down? All right, so that dropped us down about 1,000. So now we can think of, all right, well, that's still way too broad. How can I narrow this down a little bit further? Well, we can start thinking about narrower terms and we can start thinking about how to be more specific. So maybe teenagers is too broad of a population. Maybe we should narrow it down to high school students. And then maybe drug use is way too broad. Maybe we need to narrow it down to a particular kind of drug use. So perhaps marijuana use. So now we have marijuana and high school students. Let's see what that does. All right, so now we have 1,700. Now that's narrowing it down quite a bit. Now at this point, we could start to kind of look at the research and see, what it covers and what it doesn't, and start to look for leads on a gap. So perhaps we're starting to, browse through here, and we see that there are not a lot of articles that talk about high school athletes. So let's try to add that, athletes. Okay, so now we have 8. So that tells us that we're getting close to the edge of a gap. So there's a lot of research on marijuana use among high school students, not a lot of research on marijuana use among high school athletes. And you think, well, that's really interesting because maybe there's something about athletes that makes marijuana use less likely or more likely. Who knows? That's the lead. That is the research showing you where the gaps are. So you can use that strategy to kind of narrow down and see if you have something to go on. And then when you do, again, you can run through the litmus test and make sure that you have a good research problem. And then you can go over to the subject-specific databases in the library and repeat your search. And again, you can go down here to the databases list and have a look at those databases and go in there and repeat your search. Okay. I'm just having a look at the other questions here. If you'll give me just a moment. Can we use articles that have no date in our chapter 2? They would have a date, or any article that you chose to include would have to have a date, definitely. What sites are best to obtain statistical data? You can use the library to help get you started when you're looking for stats, or if you're looking for data. We do have a section on that under Start Your Research, Statistics and Data, and I'll actually copy this and put it into the chat for you. Here we go. So it was the library homepage, Start Your Research, and then the links for stats and data. This is a good guide that explains how to find statistics and gives you some good ideas for some places. So for example, we have a whole section on finding stats from government organizations. We have a whole list of sites here that are done by topic. So here we have psychology and counseling. And a lot of these are probably familiar to you, the CDC, the US Department of Health and Human Services. We also have a section on how to explore articles to look for a statistic. So when you're looking for a statistic like this, if say for example, I'm looking for a statistic on drug use among or marijuana use among high school athletes, I could have a look at the articles that came up in my search and see if there's anything there. If there's not, I can maybe try to take a step back and think about it a little bit broader and maybe try to find a statistic that's on marijuana use among high school students that I could apply. If you're looking for data, data is within the realm of the Center for Research Quality. We have a couple resources that are available for you. We have a whole database that has data sets that you can use for secondary data analysis. If you have any other questions about finding data, I would definitely check out the Center for Research Quality because they have webinars. You can pop by their office hours and ask them questions about how to get data. And also your faculty should help you be able to find data if you're looking for doing some secondary analysis. Okay. Because my topic is long, does that make it hard to find? It could. It definitely could. So think about it this way. If I kind of, came up with my topic of, let's say this. Let's say that I am a high school basketball coach in Chicago, and I think or I observe that I believe that marijuana use is a problem among high school athletes in Chicago, and that's what I want to research. Now, if I came into the databases and plugged that in, just like that, my very narrow topic, and click search, I would get no results. And that would be a conundrum because it would indicate to me that I have stumbled upon a gap in the literature. No one has done any research on this topic, but it's a catch-22 because now I don't have any literature. So what do I do? And what we always say is that if you do this and you get so narrow that you hit a wall and you have no results, take a step back. Start by, eliminating that geographical location because that's actually in the overall scheme of things not nearly as important as the phenomenon itself. So take that out, and then see where you can start getting that literature pool that you're going to pull from for your literature review. So here we are looking at marijuana use among high school athletes, and that's still really narrow. That's not enough literature to come up with a literature review. We need to not just talk about this phenomenon as it applies to our specific population. We need to talk about this phenomenon and the research that exists on this larger issue. So the larger issue is marijuana use among high school students. So let's take that specific population out, and now we have a nice large pool to get literature for our literature review. So yes, so if you do have a really long, complicated topic, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But you're going to have to be creative about how you look for your literature. Okay, there's kind of a similar question, so let me try to explain this in another way by actually we're going to go look at a dissertation that was published at Walden. I'm going to go into ScholarWorks, which is our institutional repository, and I'm going to pull up an award-winning psychology dissertation. So let's see. We'll look at this award, and let's look at this dissertation, which was by Joshua Guerin and won an award for being an outstanding dissertation. Now, if we look at their topic, the topic is exercise self-efficacy, dispositional optimism, and perceived stress in college seniors. Now, do you think if Joshua went into the database and typed in exercise self-efficacy, dispositional optimism, perceived stress, college seniors, do you think that there would be any results? Probably not, right? It would probably be zero. So, but they managed to write a dissertation on it. So how did they get that? How did they get that information? And how did they kind of go into the databases and find it? And if we just we can actually find some of those answers or at least some clues just by looking at the table of contents for their dissertation. So here's chapter 2. Here we see literature search strategy. That's that search criteria section that I was talking about. And you see here, it's just a page where Joshua had to tell us what databases he went to and how he found his information. And then we see how he might have actually structured his search. So maybe he started by looking at these different theories, a theory of self-efficacy, an attribution theory, cognitive appraisal theory. What were the theories that were behind this idea of physical activity among college seniors? And if we scroll down a little bit more, we see the conceptual model that he used. And then we see the literature review related to key variables. So physical exercise, that was probably a search that he did. So he probably did a search on physical exercise in college students to see what kind of research had been done. He probably had to look at exercise self-efficacy. What kind of research was there out there on that topic? What kind of research is out there on dispositional optimism and as it relates to exercise? Is there anything out there on dispositional optimism in college students? So you can kind of see how how this particular student broke down his complex dissertation level topic, which addresses a gap in the system and therefore, or a gap in the literature, and therefore, has no research on it. Um, you can see how they might have come up with a search strategy to help get this preceding research on all of these different aspects of his topic. So if you could kind of think about it like this, he had to go and look at each one of these things and see what the research was on that, and that kind of builds a wall. Brick by brick, you build a wall of all the existing research out there. And then as you start to build that wall, you start to see the gap of where that research isn't. And that's how he addressed it. So he looked at all these different variables, he combined them, and he looked at all the different research, found that nothing answered his question of, why is it that college seniors don't exercise? And he tried to address it through looking at these particular theories in this literature and doing his research. So I hope that kind of helps you think about, taking your topic, breaking it down, identifying that broad area of interest, working in the databases to narrow it down to your gap, and then including that really good literature that's going to provide that evidence and justification for why your study needs to be done. Okay, so I think that's about all the time that we have today. I thank you all so much for attending. I hope that you feel a little bit more confident about where to go. This webinar was recorded. You'll all get a link to it tomorrow if you want to kind of go through it again. And again, if you have any questions at all, please reach out to us at the library. We are more than happy to help. We have a whole team of reference librarians who are available to help you with your library research. I'm here to help you with your library research. Please reach out if you need anything at all. And otherwise, have a good semester, and thank you so much for joining me today. Okay, I hope to talk to you all soon. Bye.